upstairs or downstairs. So I only have to go and I still can't find my classes.
I can't find my classes. Kate, that's where I went. That's the class.
Keep them on. Case for what? Well, I used to make classes. I used to manage up. I wasn't reading the book. It makes it a little easier.
My brother.
At 40 even. We're not at 40. Yes.
We take on all kinds. We're all brothers. Why are you? It is not the way. Our condolences. Yeah, end of the line.
Yeah, and I was a year ago. My dad built a house down the
Welcome, everyone. We're going to begin. I want to welcome Rhoda's family, friends, community, those from near and those from far, as we share our love and respect for someone who radiated love and respect for all who knew her. Before we begin, I just want to share that my first experience with Rhoda was in the last chapter of her life. She had lost her keys in B'nai Yeshurun and was looking all over the synagogue for them. But in learning more about her life since then, I've discovered that this experience I had with her is actually the opposite of who she was. Rhoda was a planner. She was organized, driven, and responsible like no one else I know. So organized that her children, Larry and Jay, handed me a folder of her own hand and typewritten notes, which was titled "For My Funeral." Everything I've learned about her paints a picture of the extraordinary life of a loving mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, great-aunt, cousin, friend, and dedicated servant to the Jewish people. Today, we will recite psalms and prayers as we usher this precious soul back to the Holy One, Makor HaChayim, the source of life. We'll hear from some of her loved ones, first from her nephew, Steve, grandchildren, Larry, Matt, and Eric, and from her two sons, Jay and then Mitchell, as they share stories from her life, the impact and legacy she leaves behind. And through these stories, we'll learn that Rhoda may have lost her physical keys once, but it's clear that she always held the keys to a meaningful life, well lived, a life of Torah, service, and love. As we begin our formal service, Cantor Rosenbaum leads us in Psalm 23, followed by Rabbi Foster in the English.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lechsar, binot esher bitzeni, al mei menuchot yenaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech Begeit Zalmavet Lo Irara Ki Ata Imadi Shivtecha Umish'antecha Shivtecha Mishantecha Hema yenachamoni Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan Neged tzorelai Dishantav Hashem en Roshi, Dishantav Hashem en Roshi, Di shanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirefuni kol yemei chayai ושבתי בבית אדוני ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Thank you, Rabbi Foster. Cantor Rosenbaum will now lead us in Psalm 121.
Shir lamalot esainai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz ayitain lamot raglecha ayanum shomrecha hinei lo yanum v'lo yishon shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha yad yeminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra yishmor et nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzeicha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam.
At this time, I want to invite family members to come share stories from Rhoda's life, beginning with Steve, her nephew.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Thank you. Well, it's always fun to go first. I just want to share a few thoughts. Mitch and Jay asked me to remember a few things. I thought I would just come share them with you. For anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Steve Weintraub, and Rhoda Seifert was my favorite aunt. And as she was quick to point out, since she was my only aunt, she was also my least favorite aunt. And that's really what I remember. There's a whole lot that I remember, but as I was thinking about it the past few days, was her sense of humor. She loved to tease, and she loved being teased. And I took a page from my cousin Matt, who's over here. Every time I talked to her over the last few years, I loved, and she laughed, because when she answered the phone, I'd say, "How you doing, old lady?" She also loved a good corny joke. I remember as a little kid hanging out with my cousin Mitch, and my Aunt Rhoda and my Uncle Eddie had a Belle Barth album that they had that the two of us were absolutely, positively not allowed to listen to. So we listened to it over and over and over and memorized the whole Belle Barth album. She was kind of like a female Red Fox. She told dirty jokes. They were live. She played piano. And I can tell one of them to you. I hope I don't offend anybody. When I told these to her and reminded her that we used to sneak and listen to these albums, she would laugh. So the one I can tell you is, did you hear about the absent-minded mounted policeman? He fell off his whistle and blew his horse. She laughed like nobody's business when we told that. The other one I can't tell, but I'd like to remind my cousins over here that the punchline was, "It looked so good I ate it myself." I don't know if anybody heard Mitch laughing. So there are some other things that come to mind as I thought about my aunt. She loved Chinese food at Coventry. She loved her family. There was nothing she liked better than sitting around in her dining room playing a good game of Oh Hell with everybody that could possibly go and play. And everybody followed the rules except for Cece. And when we were young, she got a huge kick out of her nephew Brett being completely amazed that her adding machine was actually adding correctly. And he would sit for hours on that adding machine while everybody else was doing something, and she would laugh watching him do it because he did not believe that thing was right. And she loved her sons and her nephews. There were 7 of us. There was Jay and Mike. There was me, Mitch, Brett, Prince, and Boots. And the 7 of us all had a good time. For anybody who doesn't know, Prince and Boots were from the same litter. They were dogs, and we had Boots, and Rhoda had Prince. And they would chase each other through the backyard, and we always had a great time with that. She was also very generous with all of us. When I used to travel through Cleveland for business, I would always call and ask her to go to Corky's with me for lunch, and she always tried to pay. I always told Jay and Mitch when I was coming if they could meet us, they would. But she always tried to pay, and I said, no, I'm going to expense it. I lied. I never expensed it. I just liked hanging out with her, and I didn't want her to have to pay. So what else can I tell you about my Aunt Rhoda? She had a huge heart. I'm usually good at speaking, but this is tough. So I'm going to skip a sentence and just go to when I got remarried. Well, she welcomed my new wife with open arms. That's not what I had written, but you guys understand. When I saw her last a few weeks ago, she smiled at me a couple times. She didn't respond a whole lot, but she smiled at me a couple times, twice. First thing is, I asked her if she wanted to play cards with me. And she said she would, but she couldn't see so well, so she'd have to pass, and smiled. And then I told her that as soon as I left, I'm going to call her baby brother, and asked if I should call him Uppy or Butch. She smiled and said Butch. So I'd like to share one more story that I grew up with. That's my favorite, and I hope I don't mess it up. This happened between my Aunt Rhoda and my dad, and this is the way I remember hearing it. And if I mess it up, I really don't care. But this is how I remember hearing it, and I grew up with this. This happened over at the house on East Groveland. So it turns out that Aunt Rhoda was being mean to my dad again, and he'd had enough, and her bedroom was upstairs. So he chased her, and she started going up the steps, and he caught her by the ankles and started pulling her down the steps as she turned around and yelled at him, "Stop it, you're going to give me a Kanahora." He let go, and I don't know why that story has always stuck with me, but I always loved the fact that I could picture in my head, because I was at that house many times, my dad grabbing Aunt Rhoda by the ankles and pulling her back down the steps. So for me, that was funny. So, all right. So I apologize if I got that wrong a little bit. You're the one that pulled her down the steps. So I'd like to tell you and end by telling you that I traveled the world. I've been many places, seen many things, met many people, but there was only one Rhoda Seifert. She was unique. She had a huge heart, a great sense of humor, and I'm proud, and will always be proud, that Rhoda was part of my life.
Thank you, Steve. I want to invite the grandkids now, Larry, Eric, and Matthew. And just a word that you have all these wonderful people in the building, and you also have all these wonderful people on live stream who want to be a part of this ceremony. So keep in mind as much as you can to speak into the mic so they can hear your beautiful words as well. A lot of people have been asking us how we're doing these past couple days. Well, we're fantastic, but we lie a lot. Our grandma was a self-proclaimed jokester, and she proclaimed it to everyone she met. She had a whole repertoire of approximately half a dozen jokes. Whenever she thought of a new one, she was always really excited to share it, so I humored her, never admitting that it was the 5th time she told me the same joke. She especially loved it when we joked back with her, so much so that when I wrote her a thank you note for my bar mitzvah, joking that she had to sell her dining room table to get me a gift, it ended up on her fridge for 15 years. We loved staying over at her house growing up, where we'd play games for hours. It was games like Chutes and Ladders, Connect Four, and Rummy Cube on the family room floor, until we graduated to card games like Uno, Phase 10, and OHE double hockey pucks. My personal favorite game was Hide the Monkey, where we'd switch off hiding a stuffed monkey around the house and somehow found new creative hiding spots every time. At the end of the night, we'd have a normal routine of a bedtime pickle, Danish cream soda, and a movie. I could have written something more sentimental and been crying this whole time, but if I didn't joke with her, she'd think I didn't like her. But I do want to say, I'm sorry that my son Noah won't get a chance to know her. But I know that she already loved him as much as she loved all of us.
I, like others have said, will forever remember Grandma as a jokester. There were some phrases that we had to stop saying around her out of precaution. One was, "Oh my God." Her response to that was, "He's not only your God, he's my God too, and everybody's God." The longest running joke was calling her Old Lady. That nickname began before my time. From my understanding, Larry and Eric were bugging her, and she said, "Leave me alone, I'm an old lady." And from that day forth, we've been calling her Old Lady. Although over time, Larry and Eric stopped calling her that, I kept it going. Every time I would slip up and call her Grandma, she'd respond with, "Who?" Although towards the end, While she was in hospice, she referred to herself as old poop. Old poop. Now you're back with God, old lady. Your God, my God, and everybody's God.
Apart from being a jokester, our grandma was also one of the most devoted people in our lives and always made it a priority to be at every occasion, about 30 minutes early. Whether it was birthdays, graduations, or band concerts, she was always there to cheer us on really loudly. It wasn't always convenient for her to come, but she went out of her way to watch us grow up and loved sharing those moments with us. Grandma, old lady, we love you and will always cherish all of the joking, card-playing, holidays, moments, and memories we shared. As difficult as it was to watch her begin to deteriorate over the last few years, we know she was ready for this, as exemplified by the fact that she planned this whole funeral. As she often recited from a poem she wrote, "These golden years have come and passed, these golden years can kiss my," and she never said the last word.
I want to invite Jay up now.
I wanted to open with a poem my mother wrote when my father passed away. Today is not goodbye. This is only a resting place. You are the wind that rustles through our hair. You are the bright-colored flowers on a lovely spring day. You are the gentle rain that makes the flowers grow. You are the babbling brook and the soft glistening virgin snow. You will live forever in our hearts, for you are a part of each of us, and at some future time, still undetermined, we will meet again to share eternity. My mother loved volunteering. She, prior to COVID, used to work a lot of blood drives. She enjoyed making phone calls for Federation. She did a lot of that. My mom, as people said, thought she was funnier than she was. Her repertoire was pretty limited to the half a dozen jokes. We've discussed those already. Thankfully, my brother and I got our sense of humor, I think, from our father's side. Our father was a bit more funny. My mom got it from her parents. I never heard my grandmother tell a joke or anything, and when my grandfather would tell a joke, one of his favorite jokes was about the lizard, turtle, and rabbit, and when he'd tell the joke, he'd get to the punchline, and much like Matt just did, start laughing too hard to deliver the punchline. So, Matt, you inherited that from our grandfather, from Papa. What we inherited from my mother is her singing voice. My father had a great singing voice. His sister sang professionally in New York. My mom would call me every year on my birthday and begin to sing happy birthday to me. Often I would interrupt her in the middle and say, if you want this to be a happy birthday, please stop singing. My mom loved to, she fought fiercely for her family, any member of the family, if she thought they were wronged or anything. She loved to argue. My favorite story was many years ago on a 4th of July weekend. one of the cousins, I believe, was getting married because my uncle and cousins were in that weekend. I managed to get a bunch of fireworks. We went up to the park. And we're setting off fireworks. Now, my parents get home from the wedding. My father heads up to the park in a three-piece suit. Just after he's there, we're lighting off some more fireworks. Cop cars come in from two different directions. All the kids are running and taking off. We were coming in through different doors of the house, through the back alley. Of course, my father gets caught by the cops. And they ask him, what are you doing? Are you have the fireworks? And looks at them and goes, sure, I'm setting off fireworks in a three-piece suit. They ask him, well, why'd you run? Well, because everybody else was running. So now after we're in the house, my mother's asking where my father is. Well, I think the police have him. So she trots off to go confront the police officers, and she goes over there and starts telling them, why do you have him? I'm a jury commissioner. I know Judge Klein, and I'm a jury commissioner. You need to let him go. And eventually they did. Kind of got in a little bit of trouble over that one, but it was an interesting time, and that's the way my mother was with fighting for Dad or whoever else. My mom really did and constantly stated these past few years she wanted to be with my father, and now she is.
Thank you, Jay. Mitchell.
Okay, bear with me. Hi, Mom. How are you? I'm fantastic, but I lie a lot. I'll bet that if she could answer that same question today, she would not qualify her answer. For as long as I could remember, she's been wanting to be with my dad. Mom, just remember that Dad has been on his own for 29 years, speaking without being interrupted, eating anything he wants without being monitored. So please stop nagging him. For those of you who didn't know my mom, she loved to do for others. She volunteered for blood drives. She volunteered for Montefiore. She volunteered for B'nai Yeshurun. She volunteered for JNF. She volunteered for the Israeli army. On her free time, she enjoyed knitting and playing cards with her family. Her family was everything to her. She took us all on a Disney land and sea vacation. She went to all the kids' band concerts and other school activities. She enjoyed spoiling them with gifts, and she loved to watch them when they were young. Every month for the past many years, my mom would make me lemon cake and either noodle kugel or tuna noodle casserole and bring it to work. I didn't have the nerve to tell her how bad it was the last few months because she looked so forward to making it and seeing me. My mom also told my brother to call her every day because he was single and she needed to know that he was home safe every night. My mom was so organized. She planned this funeral and even wrote her own obits. She also wrote a note to me and my brother separately that we found on Tuesday while rummaging through her things, and I'm going to read it. Bear with me. Okay. Dear Mitch, first let me say how sorry I am for all the problems I've caused you. You've been a good son. You were so easy to raise and were never a problem, other than our trips to the hospital. You know how I love to tease you. I'm very proud of you, what you've made of yourself, and the person you are. You're a good son and a good father. I know you'll always stay close to Jay. He's a good brother and uncle, and will be there for you if you need him. Remember always how much I loved you. Love, Mom. My mom used to tell me that I would probably not give her a eulogy, as I did with my dad. With my dad, I couldn't sleep one night, so I went into the other room and wrote his eulogy. He just happened to pass away the next day. Funny thing is that I told myself that I wasn't going to write one for my mom, but I kept waking up and writing it in my head until I finally decided to jot it on paper. So I guess you were wrong, Mom. Love you, Mom. Oh, baloney. Love you, Mitch. Oh, bullshit.
Thank you, Mitch, and the entire family for all of your unique and wonderful and personal stories of Rhoda. Our tradition teaches us in the Talmud that Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bezeh. All of Israel is responsible for one another. Rhoda embodied these words with fervor and ferocity, with humor and with love. Those who know her know how committed she was to volunteerism, as we've touched on, to humanity writ large, but most particularly to her Jewish community and to Israel. She took great pride in her tenure as sisterhood president, and a list of her accomplishments alone would take hours. So I'd rather share her philosophy behind this commitment to sisterhood in her own words. Rhoda was drawn to, quote, the enlightenment, camaraderie of women, growth, warmth of family, spirit, opening a new world, thrill and privilege of being a sisterhood president. And interestingly, she notes how, quote, B'nai Yeshurun Sisterhood was formed in 1899. The first sisterhood president was a man. They probably felt women weren't qualified to head an organization. They sure had a lot to learn. And no question, Rhoda has so much to teach us about how to do and be better. Rhoda wasn't only a planner, she was a doer. She enacted Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bezeh, Jews' responsibility toward fellow Jews, in a way that spans the entire life cycle. She knit hats and blankets for premature and sick babies, gowns for sick patients at Mount Sinai Hospital, and she also knit hats and burial shrouds for Israeli soldiers. She personally fulfilled what we pray about in Mariv, the evening service, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, spread over us the shelter of your peace. She literally covered us with her shelter of peace from birth to death. She also took great joy in knitting Afghans for Jay, Mitch, her brother, Phil and Cece, nieces and nephews, great nieces and nephews, cousins. She knit in honor of Larry and Debbie's wedding, and planner that she is for future weddings to come. Physical ways in which her family will always be able to bask in the warmth of her everlasting love. There's a story about how Rhoda, who would enthusiastically make calls each year, every day of the Jewish Federation's call-a-thon, and how she apparently secured the call-a-thon's largest ever pledge. The story goes that her meek and modest suggested donation was met with an astronomical pledge instead, which goes to show you that one phone call with this woman had the power to inspire you to dig deeper, to give more, to love the Jewish people with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, like she did. Rhoda, self-taught in the accounting field and logging 45 years of work at an accounting firm, was so organized and responsible that she even improved the efficiency of the Israeli army. The Israeli army. She volunteered for 3 weeks in the largest training base in the Negev. She tells the story of a time that a gun was stolen from the base, as well as the gun receipt with its serial number. Rhoda gently asked the base commander, "Aren't receipts in duplicate?" It turns out they were not, but since that conversation, Rhoda's bookkeeping methods were immediately adopted as official base policy. Whether it was registering people for Red Cross blood drives, interviewing jury candidates, gift wrapping drives for Montefiore Nursing Home Auxiliary or of Menorah Park, selling wedding and B'nai Mitzvah invitations to raise money for B'nai Yeshurun for over 50 years. Every institution that benefited from her selfless passion is much stronger and more secure thanks to her extraordinary efforts. But it's not just that she did those things. Dayenu, that would have been enough. It's the way she did it. She did it with a smile that everyone remembers and talks about to this day. She did it with a joke that elevated the mundane and made it joyous. I think that at the core of Rhoda's dedication to Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bezeh, responsibility for our own, is the idea that family always comes first. It's no surprise then that she so loved you guys. She always showed up. She always offered her shelter of protection. She tells the story of driving down to a college campus where she confronted a son's professor over a grade she didn't like and, quote, got it fixed. She showed up to every sports game, as Mitch mentioned, often bringing a cooler filled with lemonade and snacks, not just when they were kids, even to Jay's adult softball games. She loved family card games, the trips, the gifts. She says her home was always open. So much outlives your physical life, which is why I choose to believe that you didn't lose your keys. You gave them to us. We have your keys now, and it's on us never to lose them. If we all look at one another as family, as our personal responsibility, the way that she did, if we all embrace the notion that, yes, I am my brother and sisterhood's keeper, this would be a much gentler, brighter, funnier, and more compassionate world. Rhoda was so loved that I was asked to include a few brief messages from those who want to express their love and appreciation for her lifetime of service. This is from Erica Ruden-Luria and Rabbi Jeremy Pappas from the Jewish Federation of Cleveland. They write, Rhoda was a volunteer extraordinaire who literally made phone calls from the start of Super Sunday until the last possible second. She inspired us all with her energy and commitment to helping our community. During COVID, she refused to be deterred, determining, in a positive way, that we drop off stacks of donor lists for her to make her way through. She was the true definition of a selfless volunteer, and she took great pride in doing whatever she could to help. We will miss her greatly, and Rhoda's memory will be a blessing that inspires our Federation staff and leadership when we are making campaign calls this year. And this is from Rabbi Hal Ruden-Luria of B'nai Yeshurun. Dedicated. That is the word that comes to mind when we recall one of the best. Rhoda was an incredible volunteer leader, sisterhood president, synagogue historian, writer, and friend. Her devotion to B'nai Yeshurun spanned generations. Since my arrival, more than 20 years ago, every few weeks, Rhoda would hand-deliver typewritten, decades-old synagogue letters, meeting minutes, her poetry that I treasured. Our synagogue was truly blessed to have Rhoda in our congregation's family. Known to all for being all-in, engaged, kind, warm, and welcoming, she lived with eagerness, humility, and humor. Whether it was dancing at Shabbat Rocks, volunteering at the front desk, or just greeting all with her smile, Rhoda loved us all, and we all loved Rhoda. Since she was a poet, as has already been mentioned, I want to conclude my own remarks by sharing some of her own words of poetry. This is just an excerpt at the very end of a poem she wrote after a very influential, impactful trip to Israel. She writes, "Every Jew is responsible, each one for the other. We are each other's keeper. We are each other's brother. We must all be emissaries of the message that must be sent. We must keep up the pressure. We cannot and will not relent." Rhoda, I want you to know that inspired by your memory, even when you're no longer physically with us, because of you, we cannot and we will not relent. I want to invite Cantor Rosenbaum up now to lead us in El Malei Rachamim, our memorial prayer. Yes. Please rise.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utarim, Kezohar Rakia, Mazhirim et nishmat Rachel bat Yaakov udevora shelcha leolama v'gan Eden tehei menuchata Anna bala rachamim hastira b'seiter kenavecha leolamim Utror b'tzror achayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom hamishkava V'nomar Amen.
You may be seated. We're going to begin our processional now to the cemetery. I just want to share now, and I'll share again graveside, the Shiva information. Shiva is going to be held at Vitalia of Solon. This is 6050 Cruise Drive in Solon. And the family will be receiving guests there on today, after the funeral until 9 p.m., tomorrow 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and on Sunday 3 to 5.
You're going to veer left towards the open door of the coach. You're going to place your casket on the front set of rollers.
On behalf of the family, I thank you for coming. If you're going to somewhere, I ask you to please return directly to your cars. Put on your headlights and your hat. Again, thank you.
I just did the same thing every time I know what I do. That's the gloves. You're gonna redo it again. Gotcha. Oh yes, yes. She talked about you. She had that article. My grandma's a Holocaust survivor.
I'll take Phyllis home.
You're still.
Take Phyllis home. And that's it.